This podcast was recorded on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
Hello and welcome to The Real Story with Joe Hildebrand. It's a pleasure to have your company, and we've got a first-class show for you this week. Speaking of first class, see what I did there? Yes, we're going to be talking about the Prime Minister and his history of airline upgrades. Does he really have a hotline to Qantas CEO Alan Joyce? Plus, what is going on in America? Just when you thought the election couldn't get any closer or weirder, Trump has just been caught out calling Puerto Ricans garbage, and then Joe Biden has suddenly called half the country garbage. Did that actually really happen? We'll be unpacking that. Plus, what went on with the Queensland election? Stephen Miles, did he pull off a miraculous loss that was somehow better than the loss he was otherwise going to have? So it kind of is like he won, except he still lost. And how did abortion become a political issue in Australia? We're going to be chatting to someone who has a very stark warning for the Libs, and that is, do not touch this with a barge pole. All that and much, much more coming right up. First up this week, of course, is the issue that is dominating the news. It's been, 6-7 days straight, probably more by the time you're listening to this, and it is killing the poor old PM. This is the story of upgrades that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, either solicited or received from Qantas for a number of trips, including personal trips that he took with his family, where he booked an economy ticket and paid for it with his own money. Good on him. No problems there. Fantastic. But then either sought or received an upgrade from Qantas. Possibly, it is alleged, at the instruction of CEO Alan Joyce, but the PM says without having actually spoken to Alan Joyce, but nonetheless authorised by the CEO, which would guarantee him a business class and I think in one case a first class ticket on his overseas journey. Now, I think all of us would take an upgrade if we could get it. But the problem was that for some of these trips, Anthony Albanese was the transport minister. So technically he was the boss in charge of the airline industry in Australia. Prior to that, for some of them, he was just a lowly MP. So, hey, take it, why not? And none of this actually occurred during his prime ministership, but it's come out during his prime ministership, and that is the problem. Once more, like when he bought the $4 and a bit million clifftop house in beautiful downtown Copacabana Beach, it's just not a good look in the middle of a cost of living crisis, even though he didn't take any of these flights in the cost of living crisis or when he was even prime minister. So what is actually going on here? Well, there is no suggestion that the PM actually did anything for Qantas in return for these upgrades, although that is precisely what is being suggested by some of his critics. So people are suggesting that the fact that Anthony Albanese received all this largesse from Qantas might have something to do with Qatar Airways being denied extra routes, extra berths at Sydney Airport or into Australia. There has been absolutely no evidence produced for that whatsoever, but that is the kind of miasma that is floating around this and the nudge, nudge, wink, wink suggestion that some people are trying to make. Now, why is this important? Well, this goes to the Ministerial Code of Conduct, which states ministers must not seek or accept any kind of benefit or other valuable consideration either for themselves or for others in connection with performing or not performing any element of their official duties as minister. So you would have seen I broke that up into two segments, and you'll hear a lot of people talking about the first half. Ministers must not seek or accept any kind of benefit or other valuable consideration either for themselves or for others. Now, that is not actually true in and of itself. You can seek or accept any kind of benefit if you're a minister, and you can have your argument about whether that's appropriate or not. What is important, what matters, is that it can't be in connection with performing or not performing any element of your official duties as minister. So Anthony Albanese gets the upgrade, no problem. That is not inappropriate at all under the Code of Conduct. But if, of course, he gets the upgrade and then says, no, I'm going to protect Qantas's market share by not allowing Qatar Airways into Australia. Obviously, that's a problem. Or if you do not do something, if you say, well, I'm not going to act on this as a result or after getting this upgrade, if those two things are connected, and again, it says it cannot be in connection with it. So a little bit blurry, but no one has actually been able to establish that yet. But it kind of doesn't matter because, as the old saying goes, in politics, perception is reality. And so if people think, you got that upgrade and then you did a favour for Qantas, it doesn't matter if that's absolutely not true. All that matters is that people think it, or that that's just the connection they form in their minds. It's the vibe. This is why the PM is in a bit of hot water this week. This is why the buying of the $4.3 million clifftop house on the Central Coast is a bit of an issue for him. It's not that he did anything wrong. He did absolutely nothing wrong. Anyone would want to buy that if they could afford it. In fact, he paid less than the house actually changed hands for at the previous sale. So this is a great Sydney success story. He beat the market. And of course, at any other time, people would be going, yeah, all right. But again, it's just the look of doing that in the middle of a housing crisis that everyone else is going through, just a little bit off. And again, even though the PM didn't do anything wrong, none of this occurred when he was actually the PM. The fact that it's kind of come out in the middle of a cost of living crisis when few of us can afford to even get on a plane in the first place, let alone go at the pointy end, it just puts together a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces seem to fit, even if they don't actually fit. So it's just building up a bit of a picture of a vibe of, a PM who's, doing great. All the rest of us are struggling. And that is the pickle that he's in. And of course, I say that as someone who loves the little fella very much. But the good news for the PM is that all these travel scandals are always self-extinguishing, because as soon as they get raised and as soon as someone gets pulled out and said, you took that upgrade, or you did that travel rort, or you did this or that, it instantly emerges that absolutely every single politician has also done it. And this is going to be the PM's saving grace. In fact, it's been suggested that if this was actually a parliamentary sitting week, ironically, this issue would be dead in the water. Because, of course, all the people accusing the PM of doing something wrong have done the exact same thing. They're all members of the Chairman's Lounge. Everyone's a member of the Chairman's Lounge except me. Make me a member of the Chairman's Lounge, Mr. Joyce. I'll do whatever you want. Have as many roots as you want. ROUTES. Point being, you've had, Peter Dutton has his business interests, everywhere. I think he's got a trust fund. And good on him, he's doing well in life. But he's received the upgrades. He's in the Chairman's Lounge. Bridget McKenzie came up and said, I've never had an upgrade. Then she had to go back and check it. Oh, whoops, turns out I did have an upgrade. There was a travel rort scandal that emerged in the first term of the Howard government. And it got so ugly so quickly with so many accusations against so many politicians. It had very nearly tragic consequences. And after that, everyone just said, you know what? We're just not going to talk about this anymore. We're just going to stop. They really did. They just shook hands and said, no more travel rort stories. The travel rorting continued, just not the stories. And again, it happens again and again. We've seen it with the back and forth over Bronwyn Bishop's famous helicopter ride. And then there was fallout from that on the other side, and other MPs had to repay money that they'd claimed. So again, this is one of those things that you probably want to keep stum on. Did the Prime Minister get an upgrade? Well, yes, but not when he was Prime Minister. Do you really want to bring out a sort of shame file of all the politicians who have got upgrades over the past? So sure, I'll make it easy for you. It's all of them! And now let's talk about the other biggest story on the planet, and that is the complete and utter implosion of the US Democratic Party. It is just phenomenal. Honestly, you could give these guys a pineapple and a blender, and instead of making a pina colada, they'd stick their in the blender and shove the pineapple up their The latest thing that has happened was a giant gift for the Dems in the US. This was, of course, the giant Trump rally that they're all losing their minds over in Madison Square Garden in New York. They're saying, oh, it's a Nazi rally, oh, there's Nazis everywhere. Never mind the fact that there were Jewish people speaking at the rally endorsing Donald Trump. They go, oh, yeah, no, but apart from the Jewish thing, he's a Nazi. It's like the Jewish thing was pretty central to what it meant to be a Nazi, FYI. The whole thing was kind of built around that kind of, you take the Jewish thing out of Nazism, they're kind of not Nazis anymore. Anyway, little history lesson for you, lefties. Anyway, they're losing their minds, saying it's a fascist rally, Nazi rally, greatest threat to American democracy ever. He's going to make himself a dictator. You know, there'll never be another election again. They're literally saying this. You vote for Donald Trump, you'll never get to vote again because he's going to make himself a dictator because he's a Nazi fascist. Yep, it's all out there. They're all saying it. The warm-up to this big extravaganza, there's some comedian that I've never heard of. I'm not even sure if he's a comedian. Didn't seem to be particularly funny. And he made the following gag.
Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Now, that is because apparently Puerto Rico has some kind of garbage collection problem, or there's trash in the street. I don't know. Never been there. Always thought it sounded really nice. I only really know it from the song in West Side Story, but still. Point being, this guy has called Puerto Ricans garbage. Now, Puerto Ricans are citizens of the US, but they don't vote in US elections. Just another fun fact about how weird the US political system is. I'm not sure how you can actually be a citizen yet not be entitled to vote in the elections of the country you're a citizen of, but whatever. So it's a territory of the US. It's not a state, so it doesn't have voting rights because the electoral college system, as you would have seen in my amazing viral TikTok video, whatever the thing was, the electoral college system is what determines the US presidential election, and only states have those college systems. But whatever. Watch the video. Point being, however, Puerto Ricans do have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of family members in the US who are proper US citizens living in states who can vote in the US presidential election. And so a whole bunch of people are saying, right, well, that's it. He's just pissed off. He's just called, hundreds of thousands of people in the US garbage. And these are people who can vote. He's saying, well, he said their homeland is garbage. And, of course, it wasn't actually Donald Trump who said it. It was some warm-up guy. But, whatever. He was at a Trump rally and, they're all fascists and Nazis and everything. So why not? Trump, of course, very quickly distanced himself from the guy. Said, I don't know who he is. I don't know what he said. Whatever. No, it's not me. It's just some guy. You know that when Trump is distancing himself from you and saying, oh, those comments were a bit out there for me. Probably gone too far. So this is a great gift for the Democrats, right? This is an absolute out of the blue moment. This is manna from heaven. This is just a ray of sunlight in what is an increasingly despondent campaign where they seem incredibly likely to lose. Donald Trump is odds-on favourite to win next Tuesday. So what do the Democrats do? Well, out comes old sleepy Joe Biden. They juice him up and he re-enters the world. I mean, everyone's forgotten the guy's president still. But anyway, out he comes and he says this.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Yes, Joe Biden responds to Donald Trump's warm-up guy calling Puerto Rico garbage by calling Donald Trump's supporters garbage, which is basically half the US voting population. With a week to go before an election, he calls half the voters garbage. And then Joe Biden comes out and says, oh, no. I wasn't calling Donald Trump's supporters, plural, garbage. I was referring to that one Donald Trump supporter, i.e. the warm-up guy. I was referring to his garbage. It was supporters with an apostrophe. Thanks for clarifying that, Joe. Really, and again, it's just so bad. I've just never seen anyone be handed a gift like this and just manage to make it blow up in their face. This is not even like handing someone a grenade and then pulling the pin and it blowing up in their face. This is like them building a bomb from scratch just so it can blow up in their face. It is unbelievable. And this is why the Democrats have to lose. Donald Trump does not deserve to win this election, but the Democrats deserve to lose it. They have so completely and utterly and thoroughly screwed this up right from the outset, right from not tapping Joe Biden on the shoulder and say, no, old man, you are not going to run for a second term. You are not mentally fit. From them denying that he had any cognitive impairment until it was so clear for everyone to see that they ended up having to roll him, but rolling him when he was too late, rolling him before they could get literally any other candidate who would actually beat Donald Trump. Any of them. There was a whole field of them out there, a whole field who could have run the primaries, been properly blooded, properly vetted, ready to go, match fit, shredded. And instead they leave it so late that the only person who can actually be subbed in is Kamala Harris, who performed worse out of all the candidates in the 2019 presidential primary when she went up against Joe Biden, who was literally picked purely because she was a black woman and they needed something to offset an old white man. And she's the only one they can put in because they screwed it up by leaving it for so long and denying what was obvious to absolutely everybody. And this is where we get to the nub of it. Because let's say that they're actually right. Let's say that Donald Trump really is a threat to democracy, that Donald Trump is a fascist or a Nazi and he's going to make himself dictator of the greatest democracy on earth. If they really believe that, and all they were going to do to try to stop it was put up old sleepy Joe Biden, and then their next best plan was to put up someone who couldn't even articulate a thought in her head, who doesn't even remember what her position is on a raft of issues that she's asked about. The two worst, most incompetent possible candidates you can think of in what is supposed to be the greatest democracy on earth. That's what they were going to stop the greatest threat to the greatest democracy on earth with? That was their secret weapon? This is like someone saying, that country's got an atom bomb and we need to fight it with this plastic fork. And very quickly before we get to our incredible interview this week, just touching on the Queensland election results. You would have heard on this show, and again, you hear everything here first, that a new party called Legalised Cannabis Party were the new besties with the Labor Party. And this gave the Labor Party the option to pony up with another party on the left instead of the toxic Greens, who they're basically at war with. And the Greens are just horrendous people who are associated with extremism and just awful, awful, awful. And of course, the Greens got absolutely smashed at the Queensland state election because of their anti-Semitism and the extremism with which they've been associated. And the great beneficiaries, of course, were Labor Party in the Brisbane seats that they're trying to hold on to. And now they're thinking maybe we can actually take one or two seats off the Greens at the federal election. And our friends, the Legalised Cannabis Party. And I am told that the Labor actually picked up about 3 seats, or managed to save about 3 of its seats and pick one up from the Greens because of those legalised cannabis preferences. So you heard it here first. That is going to be replicated at a federal level at the next federal election, where you will see Labor and legalised cannabis preference each other first in all the seats that the Legalised Cannabis Party is running in. And of course, they're going to have a crack at the Senate as well. And that gives Labor a chance to distance itself from the Greens and all their toxicity. So that is the big play that's going on in the left of politics at the moment. And you heard it all here first. Told you so. You're welcome, Australia. My guest this week is one of my favourite people. She's whip smart. She heads up a joint called Agenda C, which runs campaigns for various clients, including the Liberal Party. And she has a particular insight into politics that I think a lot of people miss. She seems to be able to sort of thread the needle while other people are sort of wading around in the weeds. And she joins me right now, Parnell Palm McGuinness. Welcome to The Real Story. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure. You wrote an absolute ripper of a column a couple of days ago in the aftermath of the Queensland election result. And that was a campaign and possibly an outcome that was marred for the LNP by the intrusion of a abortion debate that I think most Queenslanders and most Australians didn't even know we were really having. Can you just talk us through the background and how that issue crept into the Queensland state election campaign?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? So, I mean, at the top level, what happened, of course, is that Robbie Katter, the son of Bob Katter and part of the Katter Party, the franchise, the Queensland franchise, which put it on the agenda by saying that after the election, if the Liberals won, he would raise the issue of decriminalised abortion in Queensland with the objective of potentially reversing that decriminalisation. So he stated that. Well, it didn't come out of the Liberal Party or the coalition in any way, but it became an issue, firstly, because it was so close to an election, but secondly, of course, because the South Australian Liberal Party has discussed this. There was a Born Alive bill put to the South Australian Parliament recently. And of course, there are elements within the Liberal Party, particularly on the Conservative side, which are very concerned about abortion and about the scope of the abortion that's available in Australia. Some of them would like it banned entirely. They're entirely pro-life. Some of them think that our laws are simply too relaxed. And of course, there was a set of conferences at the beginning of this month, which I've sort of referred to in my article as the Conservative Coachella, because CPAC, a Conservative Conference, and ARC, which is the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, were in Australia. And of course, all of the Conservatives were having a wonderful time talking to one another and reaffirming each other's beliefs. And at ARC, Senator Jacinta Price, who we all might remember from The Voice, was asked about her views on abortion. And she said that in her view, late-term abortion is infanticide. So it's killing a baby, not just, whatever we think of it as. So that, of course, went around the media. A lot of people got concerned. Does this mean that abortion access is now under question in Australia? And it was certainly seized upon by the Labor Party as an opportunity to put pressure on the Queensland election, because the Labor Party is completely aware, as anybody who looks at stats should be, that a vast majority of Australians are in favour of legal and accessible abortion, 82% according to Pew Research.
That is a spectacular summary of where it is now. I think most people would be familiar with the fact that abortion is something that comes up again and again in US elections. It's a bit like, it's abortion and it's gun control, and it's abortion and it's gun control. And these are really hot button issues that are not necessarily first order issues for most Americans, but they are, for the people who care about them, issues that they will vote on above anything else. So you've got these are vote turning issues. These are get out the vote issues where gun owners or people who are very strongly anti-abortion will come out and vote on this issue alone. They will get off their couch and they will go and vote on it. And the difference between America and Australia, obviously, is we don't need to get out the vote. Everyone's rocking up already. Exactly. And that means our political system tends to be much more moderate and tends to gravitate around issues that affect the middle rather than issues that affect the highly impassioned kind of fringes or activist elements on the left and the right. And yet suddenly we have right in the middle of a state election campaign, abortion being front and centre. David Crisafulli has kind of been outflanked, if you like. He's been dragged into this morass by Rob Katter. He can't really deny it or say, no, we support abortions, they're great, because that will upset his Conservative base. But of course, he can't say he's going to do it because that will upset the moderate base. Suddenly, teal alert, teal alert, teal alert, teal alert. Yeah. And then Labor thinks, hang on a minute, we can then weaponise this little grenade that's been dropped on the right from the left and force. And so, and Crisafulli, I suppose, he just sort of flaps around in the middle, doesn't he? He lets this thing sort of run around like a balloon with the air let out without actually saying this is our position, without being categorical.
That's right. Until just before the election, when in a debate he said, this is my position, nothing is going to change under our government. But yeah, absolutely. And that is exactly, as you characterised it, the issue in the party is that the extremes tend to have very strong views on this one way or another. And our politicians in our system are still beholden to the extremes, just as on the left, same on the left as on the right, because the people who join political parties generally have much more extreme views than the people who vote in everyday elections, right? So in a way, the job of a leader within a political party is first of all to get pre-selected, to get into the position of power that they have by appealing to their base, to the people who are members of their party, but then somehow from that position of having appealed to those people to reach out to the broader populace and moderate their party to make them appeal more widely.
So you've got to appeal to your base when you're getting pre-selected and then get as far away from them as possible when you're going to a general election.
That's right. And abortion, as you said, in the US it's a huge issue, but we have imported that a bit in Australia, and so it is an issue within the Liberal Party in some places where it's very difficult because there is a very nuanced discussion to have around it, but some people within the party want a really unnuanced view presented by their leaders, just as on the left as well, I would say, on the same issue. There's a kind of super extreme version, which is basically no regulation, don't even think about it, don't even talk about it, just keep it out of the news. So,
and this is where you come in, and this is where you've basically offered some sanguine advice to Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party more generally, and you've basically said, do not open this Pandora's box. Do not touch this issue with a barge pole because it will turn around and bite you. Why is that?
Look, I would actually offer that advice to both sides of politics, frankly, because the moment that you open this issue, you get into a really difficult ground. Like, I have described abortion in the past as a conflict of rights, effectively. So, essentially when a woman gets pregnant, all of a sudden there is a conflict, if she doesn't want to be pregnant, between her and the baby that she is carrying. So, there has been an attempt on the left to characterise that as a clump of cells and so on. But, unfortunately, modern medicine is really, really good. And we know that dismissals like that are really just sophistry. So the question is, how do we negotiate that conflict of rights? And the way that we do that in Australia is we effectively say, in the first 3 months of pregnancy, the rights still belong to the woman. Yep. She has sovereignty over her body and she can make that decision for whatever reason she sees fit. In the next trimester, it's more of a contested area, and then we say, well, this is really about the health of the mother, but also if there is a health reason for the fetus to be aborted. So, and then in the last trimester, more or less, our agreement is, well, at that stage, that's a late-term abortion, and really the rights sit with the baby
because that's
unless
when it becomes
there is
viable, that when it could potentially live outside.
So with modern medicine, a fetus is now viable from about 24 weeks, which is terrifyingly early if you think about it in that trimester series. So, depending where you sit on the abortion debate. Now, of course, if the Liberal Party opens this can of worms and everybody has a purity test to pass as to what stage do you think it's okay for a woman to still have that sovereignty over her body, we're all of a sudden in a discussion which a lot of women are going to get very engaged in, and possibly not on the side of the Liberal Party, but also the extremity of the views on both sides is going to end up in an unholy mess.
It's going to be an ugly... I mean, this is... And it's just such an incredible... I think anyone who has any experience with these issues knows this is incredibly... it's an incredibly intense, personal, often traumatic thing to have to deal with and go through. It's the last thing you want to turn into a political pigskin to be thrown around the battlefield in an election.
That's right. And this is the other thing that often happens. It's sort of, the Liberal Party's is in a difficult position with this because a lot of the time the discomfort with abortion ends up in a situation where they're almost de facto blaming women for being in this situation in which they might need or want an abortion, instead of looking at it from an empathetic perspective, which is, look, any late-term abortion is actually a tragedy. And it's a tragedy from the woman's perspective as much as from, whatever potential life there might be. How do we look at it as a tragedy and understand that abortion doesn't cure that tragedy? It is just abortion is a symptom of tragedy. So can we, in fact, look at how we might find other solutions to that? And that is really the nuanced discussion that needs to be had. The left doesn't want to have it because that might in some way, they feel, impinge on women's rights. And the right doesn't want to have it because they are so blusteringly pro-life at that stage that they can't understand that there might be, or they don't want to understand essentially, that there might be something much more tragic for everybody going on there.
And so you see ways where, with your experience and mastery of the dark arts of political campaigning, where if either side was to be tempted to sort of weaponise this issue, as has happened in the Queensland state election already, that you could basically atomise any side that tried to...
Absolutely. It would, a good campaigner, even a mediocre campaigner on an issue like this, could absolutely destroy either side of politics with this issue because it is really tricky. And, much as I would normally tout for work, I really don't want it on this particular issue because this is the kind of discussion that we shouldn't be having in a political forum. This should be an off-legislation issue where we look at, okay, if something is happening that is inhumane or if a tragedy is going on in women's lives, how can we deal with that in a non-legislative, non-politicised way? Because it really needs to be regarded in the social side of things rather than in the political side.
And I think that's a symptom of what's happening in politics at the moment, and I think it's in part because of social media, because we've got the whole world, the town hall, in our phone, in our pocket. Politics has become so much more personal, and there don't seem to be any lines anymore. There don't seem to be the bound. Maybe I'm just naive, and back in ancient Rome, they just used to, kill people or beat them to death with clubs in the forum, and that's how they got things up. So political debate has been robust in the past, but it seems... I'm imagining, and maybe tell us how you would frame a campaign, but I'm imagining that I've got a friend who's Lebanese Christian, and her mum was going off to vote, and a Green voter handed her a how to vote card and said, "Oh, would you like to vote for the Greens today?" And she just said, "You murder babies," and just walked up. And that's what the campaign would look like, wouldn't it? It would be the right, if the left raised it would be the right saying, "You murder babies," and if it was the right raising it would be the left saying, Peter Dutton wants to get inside your body and tell you what to do. That's
right. That's right.
No one wants that.
And nobody wants it. Nobody wants that. No, nobody wants.
Well, no, I'm not sure. I'm sure Peter Dutton. In another context, I'm sure Peter Dutton's wife is. Anyway, point being.
Joe, just
I'm
keep
just going to stop.
Keep
I'm going to stop now. The point being, it is such an incredible moral quandary, and I wasn't even sure if I wanted to get to it because I cannot wrap my head around it. It's actually just one of those things, and I'm aware of the issue, obviously, and I'm aware of the debate. And it's something that, I reckon I've got the answers to just about everything. Yeah. And that is something where I think, oh my God. And again, you can imagine a scenario, for example, where perhaps a woman was a victim of sexual assault.
Exactly.
That she wasn't aware or was, or someone who was underage, or, someone who was in denial, didn't realise they were pregnant. Which happens as well. And so there are all potential reasons why this could happen in just a tiny number of circumstances. And then, of course, the idea that you would have an alive baby outside the womb, then obviously that triggers a whole bunch of other ethical questions. Right. And again, that is the last thing you want to have in an election campaign.
Oh my God, it's the last thing you want to have politically, full stop. That's right. Honestly, I do not want the people in Parliament who yell at each other during question time discussing what I can do with my body or not. Especially especially in circumstances of immense tragedy. I just think that we need to, as a society, at the moment we have this thing where everything we don't like is something that has to be solved by government. And you know what? Some things government is just simply not competent to solve. We need to look at from a social perspective and say, okay, recognising the tragedy, how can we wrap services around a tragedy to not make it not tragic because, but to help everybody involved in that situation, everybody stuck in that particular situation.
I suppose when you've got a huge amount of medical trauma, you don't go and see your local MP. You go and see your local GP.
Right.
So maybe that's where we should leave it. Parnell P. McGuinness, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Pleasure to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us on The Real Story.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for on this bumper episode. Thanks so much for your company. It's been an absolute pleasure. Speaking for myself, I hope you had a good time too. If you like what you heard, by all means, please just give us a like, rate us, or leave us a review. The review system, as I keep saying, only accepts 5 stars. Don't even try to give any other rating. It just won't work. Take my word for it. You can drop us a line at therealstory@novapodcasts.com.au if there's anything you want us to talk about or any questions, any feedback. You can also slide into my DMs on the gram. That's at Joe_Hildebrand on Instagram. And of course, you can read my columns in the Daily Telegraph and other News Corp mastheads right around the country every Monday and Saturday. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next week.